Welcome everyone to Advertiser Strategies for OTT. It occurred to me when I was in the hallway out here earlier that not everyone here knows what OTT means, so maybe we should address that up front. For those of you who don't know, over the top, video experiences for the connected living room. I'm Jameson Tilsner, business development for VHX, recently acquired by Vimeo. What I've seen from my experience at VHX developing sort of this end-to-end OTT solution is that we're at sort of a turning point in the market. Every day we hear about new properties or television production companies developing new properties for the OTT landscape and huge entrants into the landscape. Yesterday, Amazon made a big announcement about opening up their platform. So it seems like we're at this point where brands are increasingly concerned about how to reach eyeballs and audiences within that environment, and that's really the point of our panel today, to discuss what sort of considerations brands should make when thinking about the new connected living room. So with that, I'd love to allow each of the panelists here to briefly introduce themselves and what they do and how they relate to sort of this broader conversation.
Sure. So my name is Noah Fenn. I head up video sales and strategy at AOL. And we are focused across video as a medium and OTT as one of the platforms within that. And just the kind of quick tidbit that I'd kind of start with is we're very screen agnostic but device aware, and we believe that each of the screens makes a lot of sense for different reasons, and that advertisers need to kind of come along and figure out the parts and the screens that make the most sense for each part of their message.
Good morning, I'm Rob Davis. I lead strategy for the content and social team at Ogilvy. From the agency perspective, we're kind of an interesting group in that we're focused on video and content marketing that is not targeted for traditional TV. So anything else is fair game, from web video to OTT to anything else you could just about imagine.
Eric Lemasters, Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at Gaiam. Gaiam is a market leader in the health and wellness area. A lot of you will know us for our yoga mats and our balance ball chairs and some of our hard goods accessories. I manage all of the digital businesses and products for the Gaiam branded business, so that includes mobile apps, video content, so audio content, and was also involved with the launch of our over-the-top product, Gaiam TV, which has been rebranded as Gaia recently, so helped with that distribution strategy as well.
Hello, Shannon Rutherford. I'm the Director of Video Operations at the NFL, and I work on all of the streaming media delivery, so primarily on the technology side. And in that capacity, I become heavily involved with implementing ads into live streams as mid-rolls. So if I have anything to add, it would be on the technology implementation side.
Great. Anyone here by chance representing an advertiser? I know you won't admit it. So Eric, you're going to have to be the voice of the advertiser today.
What's my budget?
You have a budget.
Rob, let's start with you.
Sure.
Is the CMO suite thinking about OTT? Should they? What are the sort of the top line considerations there?
Great question. I don't know if CMOs are thinking about it a lot, but it is definitely something that's been on the radar more and more in conversations with clients. I found the shift over the last 3 or 4 months has been, I don't have to bring it up myself. Brands are bringing it up and coming to us and asking questions. And there's a lot of curiosity from brands about what integrations are available beyond programmatic, beyond a pre-roll, beyond just something that's TV 2.0, and more about interactive experiences. What kind of interesting experiences can we create? What is going to help engage with the audience, especially when we look at niche content, which to a lot of our brands is exactly the kind of thing they're supporting when it comes to original content. Excuse me. So what are the opportunities going to be, and how are we going to find the right properties mixed with the right technology?
Interesting. Anyone else want to follow up on that point?
Yeah, I'd say, he makes a good point. I mean, being, sort of a niche content purveyor ourselves, you have to be thinking out of the box now. The old school days of let's just invest in in Google AdWords or traditional CPM placements on YouTube, hoping you're not placed in front of a cat video. Those days are long ago, and we're all a lot smarter. Technology is getting a lot better, a lot faster, and it's just a matter of understanding the landscape, seeing your customer, and just trying to hit them where they are. Be
Great.
smarter about it.
Noah, when you're talking to clients about the connected living room, what are the metrics that come up? What are they not asking that maybe they should be, given the sort of new capabilities?
Sure. I think that it's more questions for us that they have is what can I do in the connected TV or the OTT landscape? There's definitely a disconnect. I mean, we started off this presentation with let's define OTT.
Yep.
And I think from the standpoint of the buy side, that question still does come up. Does OTT simply mean the living room? Does it mean apps on phones? Does it mean the Roku and Apple TV devices? And oftentimes in RFPs, we see it split out into buckets and a lot of overlap between the two. So, oftentimes when we're addressing a client's need or even some of the questions that come up, we often say OTT becomes one of the many screens. It depends on what your initiative is, what your assets look like, and what you're looking to achieve. One thing that we found is that the OTT ecosystem is very fragmented. There's dozens of different devices out there that are capable of housing this connected TVs and all the different devices that are out there. And each one kind of has its own unique ecosystem with different ways of measuring. So it's a little bit different than some of the ways we're able to provide KPIs or kind of feedback or signals in more of the online video space. So again, the feedback is a little bit more limited in completion rates and the quartiles. Click-through rates aren't really there because we're not necessarily connecting back unless we expand the definition beyond that connected TV space. And ultimately, it kind of becomes a what as an advertiser are you looking to achieve, and here's what we can do in this definition versus this definition.
So can you dig in? Can I dig in a little bit there? So can you talk about the differences between some of those different segments and how you would address effectiveness?
Sure. I mean, effectiveness at this point in a standard, let's say, a connected TV ecosystem. So a connected television on its own, or a Roku device, or Apple TV. Oftentimes the metrics that we're able to and the signals we're able to pull from those are things like completion rate, are things like when are people dropping off, how many views, kind of very basic metrics.
Yep.
Versus a lot of the engagement elements. Now the engagement elements exist and the engagement elements are coming, but the interaction in that and the questions from advertisers, the expectation isn't there. It's almost like this ecosystem is more of an extension of television when they're bucketing it that way versus a digital video. Let's interact with this unit. Let's drive to another place. Let's get a microsite going, even though that capability exists. It's just not in the vernacular of a lot of the buy-side activity we're seeing.
Rob, do you see this the same?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think there's exactly what Noah was saying. There's a perception now that it's very much a top of funnel space, very much an awareness play. I don't think we're waiting. Maybe waiting isn't the right word, but the industry wants to see some killer applications below the awareness space. I think before we start to see people funnel through with a lot of interest. But to me, that's where the exciting part really lies. It's not just about, like I said earlier, it's not just about pre-rolls and TVC type content. This is about reaching people, getting them to lean forward on whatever device they're on. So in that sense, I think where we're kind of nudging OTT is to take on the capabilities to do the same sort of thing along the customer journey that we're used to with online video. We want to be able to track and target as precisely as possible with OTT as we can in the rest of the digital landscape.
Great. Shannon, I'm wondering, I hear that you've been involved in sort of building out a presence within OTT, and I'm wondering how other brands should consider the process of building custom technology. I've heard an argument that it doesn't make sense for non-technical companies to pursue custom front-end technology because consumers, at the end of the day, ultimately care about reliability and ease of use, and there's many platforms out there that can provide those as a partner to a major brand. So interested to hear your perspective on that.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think if I understand your question correctly, you're wondering if advertisers should be working with third parties to help them implement technologies for reaching a wider audience or for stability, or exactly what?
Not necessarily just advertisers, but any big company that's core competency is not technology.
Okay.
I've seen a lot sort of building out these technology organizations when perhaps they could very easily partner with a technology company to just sort of leverage a platform.
Yeah, I mean, well, the space is obviously very complicated and very specific, at least from my perspective. Like, I've learned a lot around how implementing ad technologies into video, and it's very complicated.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of sort of core knowledge in all of the sort of IAB and the sort of vast sort of technologies that unless you're really spending every day inside ad servers like FreeWheel or DFP, knowing how to turn all those dials, then it's not going to make a lot of sense for you to try to take it on yourself. You're going to want to have someone else who really has that skill set that can help maximize your reach.
Yep.
Does that sort of answer your question, or at least get somewhere near it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
I mean, I could add something to that. So, you know, we at AOL and Verizon, as our parent company, have a lot of partnerships in market with folks that have really great content, but don't have that technology front and back end, and are just looking to reach more people, right? And there is definitely a benefit there in trying to build something new versus leveraging the platforms that are out there, and vice versa, by the way. You know, I was having a conversation earlier today about discovery in an OTT landscape versus discovery in a more pure play digital online landscape.
Yep.
And the fact that in OTT, it's not the same feed structure, it's not the same, you know, sharing structure, it's not necessarily connected to your phone, as an example, if it's a Roku or an Apple TV or an Xbox. And so the discovery process comes down to I turn on my device, I see a bunch of apps. Some people don't even realize that there are more apps that they can find. How do you promote the apps? And there are certain things that are happening in the market right now. But ultimately, there's kind of a comfort level that we've seen, at least in the OTT space, where, you know, you need to be in a certain threshold of apps that are known to scale. And if you're not, sometimes it makes more sense to partner with someone who is already in that, you know, top of fold placement. So I do think that there's an importance there.
Interesting. So how do you become one of those top of mind apps?
I don't have the answer to that. It's a combination of being top of mind in general. It's a combination of transition from traditional mediums. You know, we've seen some of the bigger broadcast companies start to play in the OTT space. You know, CBS, CNN, and then on the AOL side, Huffington Post and TechCrunch, and you know, even AOL as a whole. We've transitioned apps and letting people know in the traditional or the kind of the primary medium that this app exists in another place, and trying to drive to there. But at the end of the day, it is a very tough transition at the start, at least. And when you hit that critical mass and you become a must-have app to download, and people know that they can, then you can attain scale for sure.
Great.
Yeah, James, I could speak to that a little bit. When Gaim launched our OTT app on Roku, and this goes back 4 or 5 years ago, we were one of the only ones in the lifestyle category. So we didn't really have to do anything to get visibility because we had the visibility and we had the real estate, and that was a great position to be in. Fast forward to today, and now it's you get lost. So we went from literally spending $0 on marketing the channel on the platform to 7 figures on any significant platform. And that's, you hope to get on the charts, right? Because that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if someone's looking for something. But, if you don't have that, I feel for anyone who's trying to launch a branded niche OTT channel right now. I mean, it's not a small endeavor by any means. Is
that a strategy that makes sense for a major advertiser? So we've seen a handful. Gaim is one of them. I think Red Bull has a presence within OTT, a handful of others. Is that a strategy? Rob, maybe you can speak to that.
It's definitely a strategy for the handful of companies that have a right to have a media arm like a Red Bull. I don't think it's a strategy for a lot of brands. I don't think we're going to see a rush to that. In fact, I think I'm getting a sense that there are a lot of brands questioning the whole idea of being a house of content right now, and understanding that there is a relatively select number of brands that will succeed at that. And the questions that we're getting now, I think really kind of echo, Eric, a little bit of what you were saying, which is, what's the growth of the content going to be? What's the growth of the platform going to be? How are people going to discover? I think discoverability is a big question. So it's one thing for an advertiser to want to link with a very specific property. It's another thing for an advertiser to look at OTT in general and say, what's my play? And I don't think we're at that point where it's clear yet.
And I would say age comes in as well.
Definitely.
Millennials are seeking this out. They see OTT as another medium to discover and find content, and they might go a little bit deeper in the menu or do a quick search online to figure out if the thing that they like there exists where they could watch it in their living room. Versus other audiences, it's a study of one or two, but my parents were shocked. They said, "Oh, you can get that on the Roku? Oh, can you get it for me?" And thinking I had to download it and figure it. It's like, no, it's in the menu. You just hit, I want that channel, I want that app. Oh, okay, cool. So I think that there is definitely a skew when you start to break it down by age.
My best focus group are my teenage kids.
Right.
I mean, as much as I think I know it because I'm in it every day, I always have to default to them. And I learn stuff all the time that I realize I didn't know. It's interesting.
What about creative units? Are they shifting at all? Should they for this different environment? I mean, I think we've become pretty accustomed to 15, 30-second pre-roll ads. Does that work? And talk about targeting within an environment or a device that's shared.
Yeah, I mean, Noah, do you have some?
It's two very different questions, I'd say. So the second question of targeting, I would say, is the OTT ecosystem, VOD in general, is very unique in that it's a self-selected audience. And what that means is typically on television there might be an hour-long program. There might be a news program or something on different topics. But within that hour-long program, there might be something on health and beauty, and there might be something on sports, and there might be hitting different demos along the way. Whereas OTT, someone is saying, I want to watch this health and wellness Gaim, right? I'm that audience, and if Gaim knows who their audience is, or if we're able to pull that through back-end data, which we have and many others that are in the space have, then those moments become much more valuable for advertisers, right? The CPM would go up as a result of being more granular and niche versus being a pod within something that might be something for everyone, right? It's a more self-selected audience, and I think that there's a lot of value there. I would also say, kind of in the creative side, to talk to your first point, that the creativity, the 15s and the 30s, that's a very legacy mentality, and we've seen the legacy mentality cross over into digital. And in fact, I've been an advocate for why are we talking about 15s and 30-second times if we're not talking about pods and kind of a fixed linear program. The answer is you don't have to. It can be 5 seconds, it could be 8 seconds, it could be 26.5 seconds. It doesn't really matter. It really comes down to what the advertiser is trying to do. So if you're able to combine targeting in the demo side as well as targeting and connecting an OTT campaign with, let's say, a digital campaign with back-end data, you might be able to tell the first part of the story in pure play digital and follow up in OTT, or vice versa. Tell the longer story in OTT because someone is in that lean back, watch TV mode, and then when they're on their mobile device, tell that shorter reminder story. So connecting the dots there.
Can you talk a little bit about if anyone knows the mechanics of connecting those dots across devices?
It's tough right now. We're just at a point where I feel like with traditional online video, we're getting to a good place. And now to throw in OTT, it really complicates the issue tremendously. And that's why I think that there's kind of, to your question rather about units. I kind of look at it as two ways. There's advertising and there's marketing. right? So the 15s, or to your point, whatever length they are, it doesn't have to be an arbitrarily set number. Pre-rolls, that's kind of advertising. That is what it is. We know that space. That's not a groundbreaker. What starts to get interesting is when we look at what the marketing capabilities are. How can we follow people through the customer journey? How can we hit them on an OTT device at the right time with the right message? The ability to do that online obviously is relatively mature. The question I have from an advertising point of view and from a creative point of view is, when am I going to get that for OTT in mass and scale enough that it matters to start creating content specifically for OTT?
And what is the scale that you need to see? How do you think about
that? Scale might not be the right word. It's not, because they certainly don't want to make it sound like, we need to have, a Carl Sagan's billions and billions of stars. We need to have, what it is I think a question of being able to track and identify and target the audience in a reliable enough fashion that we know who we're reaching when with what message.
By the way, if anyone in the audience has follow-up questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll reserve about 10 minutes at the end for audience questions, but happy to engage you in the conversation if you'd like. Any other thoughts on creative units, how that's shifting? What about interactivity?
I think, from my point of view, what's been an interesting thing to learn is that a lot of VPAs are getting pushed. And in my world, live streaming, where you're taking a live game, in the case of the NFL, or a linear channel, and you want to dynamically insert ads when you have those pods. What's been happening occasionally that's been troublesome is that VPAs have been pushed as the creative to dynamically insert, but you can't play a VPAid on an iPhone. So we end up losing that sort of pod, and the user just sees slate rather than ads being replaced. So we had to kind of work with all of the agencies to make sure they're trafficking the right ads for this application.
For those who don't know VPaid, talk a little bit about that and what the alternative is that you're looking at.
I don't know a ton about VPaid. I know it's a interactive sort of format that is preferred, I think, for a lot of desktop applications. And anybody, please correct me who knows more about it.
I can go into a little more depth. So
Sure.
There's essentially a couple different standards. The first, most primary basic standard is VAST, right? And that essentially is to serve, it's just a template to serve an ad, a standard ad. There's not really a feedback loop that happens. There's no collection or the ability to provide interactivity. VPaid essentially is the next phase, the next generation of VAST. It allows for the interactivity, for interactive overlays, for more collection of data, and I can go deeper into that, but we'll leave it there. The standard of the future, it's looking like, is moving into a JS VPaid, which essentially is HTML5. Right, and so it's more of, and the industry is seeking this, but at the same time, each of these systems have fragmented code. Like Roku has its own code base, Apple TV has its own code base. But if, as an industry, we're able to connect all of these code bases and say, at least let's find a standard in the middle that we can do it, then that would solve all of the problems. Is you have one unit that literally can flow between all of them. To the point earlier, the scale of that, and the question is, how do you actually connect the dots? Oftentimes, the back-end technology, AOL has a really robust back-end, and it's called One by AOL, and it essentially has the ability to serve across all of the different screens. Oftentimes, you have the data, you're ready to go, but you don't have the creative that would fit within. So we have the audience now that's on OTT, but we can't actually serve the ad because we have the wrong creative, or vice versa. So I think it's more about the industry coming together and standardizing, which the IAB is working really hard on, the MRC is working very hard on as well.
Have any of you seen research or done research that indicates, Rob, you mentioned that sort of a top of the funnel activity, but how audiences receive advertiser messages in this context versus other contexts, and sort of how you should think about where this is most effective, other than just sort of that top of funnel idea?
Yeah, well, we haven't done any research in my team on this yet, but from what I've been reading and what I think is most interesting is that The idea for right now, with OTT the way it is, to use it as a trigger for a two-screen interactive engagement. So, and I know you made this point earlier about, teasing a little bit. So, understanding that if the person is using this more as a TV experience than an interactive experience, they probably have their iPad, their iPhone in their hands. Mm-hmm. Is there something we can do that triggers that deeper engagement on the second screen rather than on the first screen right now, since we're still in an area where it's a little bit clunky?
Simultaneously.
So, could be simultaneous, could just be, hey, I've got this, something that triggers the desire to learn something deeper, to go deeper into the content from the brand on the spot.
And oftentimes people aren't holding a mouse in OTT environments.
Right.
They're holding a remote that has a couple of buttons on it. You're starting to see a touchpad mentality from Apple.
Yep.
Imagine being able to then interact and move around the screen more fluidly like a desktop. That's when things can potentially shift more in the engagement. But the second screening, the correlation of users that are watching on a big screen and have a second screen, and I don't have the exact statistic, but it is extremely high. It's somewhere in the 70-80% range. So to be able to drive that message or to drive some kind of an action on the second screen is great. Capturing it though, knowing that someone did that is a different story.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Let's talk about sort of how the industry is evolving generally. Are there maybe Shannon, you can speak to new initiatives that you're working on, things that are exciting both on the content side and on the advertising side.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the thing that has been exciting and a fun challenge is kind of the theme of making the digital live viewing experience better than television. And a lot of that is around targeting, personalization, and there's a lot of things you can do on a phone or tablet or device that you can't do on a traditional television. So that is a very exciting sort of field to be in, and part of that obviously is always how you're going to monetize. And there's been some interesting challenges that I personally have to solve on making sure we can maximize the monetization. Obviously, the broadcasters who have rights to the NFL games, those pods are very, very high value, and you cannot lose opportunity on those pods, and you want to make sure you're maximizing. So things like a user enters the ad break mid-ad break. What do they see? Do they see the broadcast ads that are behind it, or do they see ads that we dynamically insert right away? That's one challenge I'm trying to solve. The other thing is Nielsen tracking. What do the actual publishers and buyers want from a metric standpoint? Do they want just straight impressions? Do they want Nielsen ratings? What is going to be that standard going forward so that we can all implement technology that is going to deliver the right metrics? So that's another challenge as well that we're working with. Some people really require Nielsen, some require ComScore, some require just impressions from an ad server. So kind of figuring that piece out will also be, I think, important.
Do you not see any trend as far as what advertisers are demanding in that respect?
Nielsen is definitely a trend. Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest trend, and just stability and I would say the desire to personalize and target the inventory.
Yeah, I'm seeing, at least from our clients, that Nielsen is a very good baseline, especially the Asian gender. But it's what else can we learn? What else can we get from this? A good example would be if a certain show does 3 or 4 points in adults 18 to 49. What's the distribution of that? Is it everyone is over 40? Is it everyone is between 18 and 25? Because there's a big difference there, right? And so the question is, now that we can get deeper, now that we can target better or measure better, we are seeing advertisers say, okay, so now we want to run a Nielsen OCR, DAR, so the new name for it, campaign, and we also want to know this, and this, and can we also buy on those metrics as well? So it's definitely a more granular conversation.
Quick example of what some of those metrics might be?
It might be things like, DAR, adults 18 to 49 plus, which content verticals perform the best and can we optimize there? which provided the best, at least in digital, like click-through rate or completion rate, and can we optimize there? Things that go beyond, so household income, propensity to buy based off of studies or based off of following the user, kind of down funnel and identifying more people like that. It gets very complicated and the scale goes down significantly the more layers you add on. But ultimately, I think advertisers are looking for more, I'd say, accountability and just more granularity as a whole to make sure that they're achieving what they've truly set out to do, not just kind of blanketing a message across a particular audience at large.
Yep. Other thoughts on that point?
I think you hit on it, that the kind of data we want is the kind of data that has enabled lookalike modeling on social media to be so effective. And getting to that, I think, is an essential piece of really developing the deep interest beyond just the awareness advertising on OTT.
Great. I'm wondering, there's all sorts of new opportunities for consumers to watch great content without advertising. Amazon, Netflix, we power multiple channels that people pay a monthly fee for so that they don't have to see advertising. Is this a concern for advertisers as you see sort of the shift from cable to this more sort of a la carte environment where people are willing to spend on content?
I mean, it depends on the advertiser's objective, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of integrations into units. We're seeing a lot of hybrids. So consumers both want to see, let's say, no commercials or as few as possible. And some people are willing to pay the rates of the subscription video on demand services. And some say, I'd rather pay a little bit less and I'll see a couple of ads. And others say, I don't want to pay anything and I want to see ads. So I think it's about choice. That's a big component of it. And also what we are seeing is as you're providing these integrations, so long as it doesn't change the authenticity of the content itself, there is a huge opportunity, and we're leveraging it. Many of the players in the space are leveraging it in just integrating, and that's it. It's not a pre-roll. It's not any of those pieces.
Yeah, and I think that's a great play right now, the way that the industry is headed, and I think that's the idea of integration, the idea that you really can't remove the brand from the content is important. I think you're also looking at a model where we're kind of in a state of flux. We don't know what the end result is going to be. How many people really long-term will pay versus go with an ad model and not have to pay, or to your point, be somewhere in the middle, Noah. I think the question for advertisers more and more is, how do we hit people at the right times throughout their media consumption lives, not just on one platform. So, if one opportunity goes away, another opportunity opens up, and you've got to be a lot more inventive in your marketing mix to make sure that you're hitting people, whether or not you're getting them on a specific channel or not.
Inventive being?
Inventive meaning, in some cases, looking at, if in saying that this is, if we're not going to advertise on platform A because subscription services have taken away the advertising opportunities, what are the other devices, channels, networks, where we're going to reach the same audience, and then heavy up on that.
And I'd also say, you can think from an advertiser perspective, there's, with integrations, there's a show versus tell mentality. So pre-roll has been about telling. It's just, this is who we are, and then the content, the content that the viewer wanted to watch all along comes on, and that's the experience, versus showing a car in action, within it. I mean, we saw it even as far back as the James Bond movies, right? It's just the bringing it into it and showing that this product is relevant and that it's part of the content itself. It's not an interruption, it's just an expression.
Right. It's something that I've been calling at the agency, this concept of inclusive disruption. We know an ad is not what somebody wants to see, right? They want to see their content. But what can we do with the content of the advertising itself that it feels more, to your point, it feels more aligned with what the user is there for, rather than something that is just entirely out of left field disruption. So, all the things we've talked about improved targeting, help us get to that. But then again, when it comes right down to the video content, I'm sure that you've seen this with content like yours, if you can marry the content and the advertising together in that kind of inclusively disruptive way, you have license to get away with a little bit more.
Yeah, we see that for sure. I mean, you can't watch a Gaiam yoga workout, for example, without seeing our mats. So there's the inherent product placement. I mean, our DNA has always been to produce media to support our hard goods, going back to the days of VHS. So that hasn't changed in terms of how what the fact that we have a desire to create media to support our products. It's just more about how we deliver it, deliver that message. And for us, the subscription is sort of that premium ad block, if you will. We're still making plenty of money through, monetizing our content online as well. So we haven't seen that cannibalization. If anything, we've seen it be very complementary, and they're probably arguably two totally different consumers. Some people are willing to pay for, that access, and some people aren't.
Yep.
So you just kind of have to be both places and be smart about it.
Are there any audience questions? Great. Let's start right here.
So I know a lot of times you talk to me about how there's a lack of premium inventory. What does that mean to people here?
Sure. So the question was, there's a lack of premium inventory, and what does that mean exactly? Who wants to take it?
I can tell you what it means, and then I can tell you what I think of it. I generally what it means is that there's it's the theory that there is a lack of highly produced professional content, or at least not in a bulk, to meet the amount of advertising or potential advertising dollars that are out there to support it. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we're at a point where we're reaching oversaturation in the market of content, and there's a lot of evidence out there, I think, that there is more content being made right now than the market could ever hope to support. And what your definition of premium may be to you may be totally different than what the definition of premium is to somebody next to you. We all hear the success stories of who's figured out a way to build an audience and make a business out of content in the digital age. But for every success story, there's thousands and thousands that have not been able to build an audience and reach it. So, advertisers kind of scratch their heads right now and look and say, well, what does this all mean? Who do I really have to align myself with in order to reach a valuable market, and who is just kind of premium or not delivering the goods?
Next question.
Wondering, are you seeing any trends with the length of commercials in this space, and also in the pre-roll, in the analytics and your channels? Are you seeing what the consumers are willing to tolerate?
Yes.
Or how many commercials you stack up in pre-roll and mid-roll?
Yeah, I can't share all the details. We're about to release a landmark study in partnership with Nielsen, but essentially looking at all screens, so mobile, tablet, desktop, and OTT. And it's a matrix view. It's kind of a configurable insight type of study. And essentially, what the study is looking at is purchase intent, recall, and favorability for the brand. It not only takes in the screens, but it takes in the length. So we studied 5, 15s, and 30s. And again, I can't share all of the results, but what we did see is that in general, people are looking for less, but from a brand's perspective, it might take longer to tell the story that you want to tell. So there is kind of that hybrid of needing a certain amount of time to tell a story. I'm sure you can concur with that. At the same time, what we found in general, and we've seen in many studies in the industry, is oftentimes when an advertisement is too long and a consumer knows it, they go into the distracted mode, they go into their second screen mode. So the ad might complete, but the user might not be engaged. And I think that's also important. So I think it's about having that dialogue and relationship, and really building kind of an empathy model of what is a fair trade-off. It's kind of what is worth taking moments out of my life to get this piece of content, and advertisers that respect it are the advertisers that are winning. I can give you one clear example, and it wasn't with AOL. It was with YouTube and Geico. There was a skippable ad. I think you guys have seen it, with the dog that jumps up on the table, and it allowed you to skip, and no one was skipping it because it was just such a great ad. It was respecting, and look, it was definitely a little bit of like gimmicky because it was new and whatever, but it was respecting the user's ability to skip, but also bringing some fun and play. Now, what people didn't realize, a lot of people who have seen that, is right in the center of the screen. The biggest thing on the screen was a Geico logo, right? The biggest thing was actually blocking it. but people still watched it. So I think it's about being creative, finding empathy, and finding the right balance versus saying, I need 30 seconds to tell my story, or I need 60 seconds to tell my story.
Yeah, I mean, that's an ongoing problem and an ongoing discussion with clients, and is trying to, get them to tell a more concise story. I don't believe in the sake of creating short advertisement for the sake of creating short advertisement. I think in some ways the whole notion of lower attention spans is kind of bogus. We did an interesting study. I can't share who this was with because it was an internal study for a client, but we looked at online skippables, 15s, 30s, and 60s, and the engagement rates across all three lengths were pretty much the same. The lesson that we learned from that was somebody who was interested in our content would actually stay. So we had the right to talk to that person longer if we wanted to. The problem is if we're in a non-skippable environment, we're boring the hell out of everybody else, right? So it's tweaking the message to the platform and kind of teaching brands. The way I like to approach it with them is, imagine you're at a cocktail party. What's the one thing you want to get across to somebody? You don't want to tell them your entire life story in 10 seconds. And a lot of brands still try to do that and pack way too much into a small amount of time. Think about the key message, get it across quickly. Don't make somebody wait 30 seconds to figure it out. Don't make them wait 30 seconds to see your freaking URL. Tell them what you want them to know.
So we're almost out of time. I'm going to take one last question right there.
Yeah, so this is a question, I think really for Ron, just about Go90. And just curious what kind of changes are happening there in advertising on two things. One is the topic at the beginning about increased engagement. And secondly, if there's anything relative to having access to another whole pool of data as a subscriber base.
Sure.
I just want to repeat the question. The question is about Go90 and advertiser innovations and the new data sets that are available.
Sure, yeah, so just for folks that aren't familiar, Go90 is a mobile-first social entertainment platform. It's primarily built for the next generation. It's a mobile-first, but we're really channelizing the way our view is, so it doesn't just live on a device. It is an app that is available now. And the innovation that's there, because it's an app and because we've embedded our SDK into it, it does give us unprecedented access to the data that we've already had, but within this app form. Innovation, because it's an app, has everything from standard advertising to in-feed advertising, but also we have a show that's coming up later on in the year. It's called The Runner. It's a production we did in partnership with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and essentially there's an interactive element to it. It's kind of a cat and mouse type of a show, and because again it's an app versus an OTT box or a television device where you're stuck with the remote that you have, we're able to build deeper innovation into the app itself and really customize each of those experiences. Does that answer your question mostly?
Also curious if anything with the subscriber data from the Verizon side.
So yeah, I can't go into too much into the Verizon data side, other than we're leveraging what we're able to provide the targeting that's appropriate. It really comes down to the device itself, the app itself, and what we can garner through the SDK that we have, and the ability to reach particular users that are opted into the experience. So really targeting based off of at more of a device signal level versus just a broad, this is entertainment, so therefore we'll reach entertainment buffs.
Great. We're out of time. Any final thoughts on advertising in OTT?
Nope.
Good. We solved it. Thank you all so much.
I still have no budget.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thank you.